Alrighty, what's going on everybody? We have ourselves a decent smallish patch this go around with Lilia joining us on the Rift for patch 10.15. As always, we don't include new champions onto the list so we can collect our data and be able to accurately tell you where she stands next patch. And with Worlds just around the corner, it's expected that these next few patches won't be too drastic of a meta shift. However, I've been wrong before, and we got ourselves a good amount of changes today, so that I welcome you all to our low elo tier list for patch 10.15. I'll be your host, jungle expert Ryan Flares Doyle, and without any further delay, let's get right into it. So, starting off in the top lane with our S tier roster, we have Shin, Urgot, Mordekaiser, Set, Jax, and Nasus. And with our god tier, still the Bash brothers of Garen and Darius. For the changes to the list, we have Tryndamere moving from B to A tier, and he's been fluctuating between low A and high B tier. We settled on low A for this patch, so do watch out for Malphite, Shin, and Urgot matchups where the rest are fairly playable. Camille's going to E forward onto the list and has been increasing in popularity and win rate in all brackets of play lately. Though she isn't a god in low elo, her mastery curve jumps very quickly, so putting time into her is worth it currently. Volibear moves from S to A tier and has been decreasing in popularity, and with Urgot and Shin in particular becoming more popular, he will likely suffer a setback on this patch. Fiora will move from S to A tier as well, and similarly to Volibear, Fiora is having a harder time as even though she's supposed to be beating tanks, she loses to both Shin and Malphite who are growing in popularity very quickly. And for our last change, we have Fiddlesticks moving from B to off the list, where the nerfs to his wave clear and Riot wanting his top lane Drang tank style to die very similar to how they always operate when AP champs go tank. So for our first top lane champion spotlight, we have Shin moving from A to S tier. He's receiving a crazy 20 base damage to his shield passive this patch. Shin is already a champion who can barely be matched at levels 1 and 2, where he is able to get his enhanced Q. Now, similar to the initial version of the Sion rework or Ornn during his peak, he will be a tank that bullies lane, and we all know how that ends. Titanic Hydra is core on this champion, as with this single damage item, a tank like Shin can almost one rotation backline champions, so do not skip it as it'll allow you to carry games even as a tank. He has playable matchups into every meta top laner, though does struggle with Mordekaiser, but the buff should really help him out. And he does smash Volibear, Jax, Renekton, and Gold, as well as other tanks such as Ornn, Malphite, and Irelia, who received a buff this patch, so you know people will pick her to feed you as Shin. Next up, we got Urgot, and he's currently sitting at a 54% win rate, a 5% pick rate, and a 4% ban rate. He is one of the strongest top laners right now, and one of the biggest lane bullies. He's very underplayed for how strong he is currently, so take advantage of this. He's a god slayer, winning matchups into Darius, Garen, as well as other popular top laners like Mordekaiser, Set, Renekton, Nasus, Jax, Volibear, Teemo, and beats the upcoming Shin as well. His two most losing matchups in gold are to Sion and Maokai, and that's literally it, and it's by less than 1%. That's how lane dominant this champion is. In Korea and China, Urgot players have been testing with a Mana Moon Rush for better scaling into the mid to late game, but the standard setup is still worth wonders. However, the biggest thing is ever since the Conqueror nerfs, PTA is a much better than Conqueror by a significant margin. And before we move on to the jungle, we have Irelia, who moved from off the list to B tier. Her win rate currently does suck in low level games, as she is a mechanically intensive champion that requires a lot of limit testing before you can see wins with her. The buffs she received to her attack speed during the mid to late game should help her smooth out her power curve. Though it might not seem like a big buff, the attack speed is for each stack of her passive, which adds up incredibly quickly. Also, this is a buff to the part of her kit that requires no skill, which is just auto-attacking people with Bork once you get your passive fully stacked, which isn't too hard. This means that even after they miss their stun, Irelia will do the classic RQ Bork auto you to death combo. For her build, remember to abuse items like Bork and Death's Dance as much as possible. This is mostly a reminder as she hasn't been on our low elo tier list in a while, and her build has changed since the old Trinity Force first setup. Also, if you don't need the Wits End second, Trinity Force second item outperforms Black Cleaver significantly. Moving on over to my home sweet home in the jungle, our S tier roster this time will be Warwick, Vi, Graves, and Echo, with our god tier of Volibear, Kayn, and Kha'Zix. For the changes to the list, we have Karthus coming from off the list to B tier, and after his buffs last patch, Karthus has become extremely viable in almost every role and even in low elo, so he'll be added to our B tier. Fiddlesticks is going to move from S to A tier, and this honestly doesn't have to do with his nerf or anything, it's just the increase in popularity of Volibear, Vi, Hecarim, and Karthus, who are all winning matchups into Fiddle around gold. And with that, his win rate is on the downward trend, so we stuffed him down to high A tier. This one's going to come as a shock. Master Yi is, for the first time in a really long time, will drop out from our S tier to around high A. He struggles against Rammus and Vi, who have been getting more popular recently, but it mostly comes down to the fact that the jungle meta shifted entirely due to how absurdly popular and strong Kha'Zix is. Ka is his third most popular matchup and hardened right into it, so we decided it's a good time to have him fall down a tier. And for our last change, we have Mundo going from B tier to the Shadow Realm, as Mundo simply fell below the 1% play rate threshold we have for our tier list, and his win rate is very mediocre, so making an exception for him doesn't make any sense. So for our first jungle spotlight, we got Kha'Zix, who moved from A to God tier. He is one of the fastest rising stars in the jungle and is single-handedly shaping the jungle meta currently to his overwhelming performance in certain matchups like Mastery and Lee Sin. He is also one of the few champions that have a very positive win rate versus Echo and destroys Kayn and Gold, currently making him a God Slayer. He does suffer versus Volley and Rammus, but all of the other matchups are playable, even the ones that are only slightly unfavorable. He's got a whopping 52% win rate, 11% pick rate, and a 7% ban rate in Gold, and this continues to increase the higher you go up the ladder. This champion is a climbing machine, and the higher you go, the less losing matchups he gets. Though Phase Rush is his highest win rate set up in Masters Plus, anything below that, Electrocute outperforms them and is more popular. And for your ability evolutions, Q Evolve first after the buffs to his Q is very popular with W Evolve second, or for a more utility and team focused playstyle, you can evolve your R first, then W second. Next up, we got the Armadillo going from B to A tier, and this one's kind of funny because his increase in win rate and popularity are directly tied to the rise of Kha'Zix. Until you hit around Masters Plus, Rammus is one of the few definitive counters to Kha'Zix who took the meta by storm recently. The only real reason he doesn't counter Kha'Zix above Masters is you end up having to play Rammus in Masters Plus, where the champ itself is simply too weak, but the champion itself is a nasty counter to the bug. The reason for this is that Ka can't one-shot Rammus, and it's not even close, and anytime a fight happens, if Rammus just rolls into him and taunts him, Kha'Zix can outplay this level of skill, so he just dies. This is also why Fiddle does decently well into Kha'Zix as well. You have the targeted CC chain. It's very valuable against such a mobile, squishy champion, but the drawback is Fiddle can get one-shot by Ka, where Rammus can't. So yes, he is moving up a tier simply for being a counter to one champion, causing his pick rate and win rate to climb. It's just that that champion is so popular that Rammus can leap up from it, okay? Next up, we got Skarner moving from off the list to B tier, as I'm pretty sure Captain Flowers is busy somewhere making happy scorpion noises celebrating the buffs to his main. Though there weren't too many changes, the buffs are incredibly impactful to Skarner's overall playstyle. The E1 is simply an amazing quality of life change, as it was very difficult to hit anybody in a minion wave with your E, and Skarner was useless enough already. The biggest of the changes is how his Q deals damage. Sorry Captain Flowers, looks like the full AD Chad Skarner will need to take a back seat for now, as Tank Skarner is looking much better. The big thing here worth noting is the AD scaling on his Q sucks now, but it has max HP damage on it. So going tanky with CDR items to get as many Qs off as possible is more rewarding than previously. This means going Cinder Hulk into a 20% CDR item like Iceborne, potentially a Trinity Force still, or Black Cleaver are a solid option, as well as of course move speed increasing items like Righteous Glory or Deadman's Plate. We predict him to reach at least B tier, but potentially if the numbers pan out well enough and an optimal build is found to take advantage of his new Q damage numbers, he could climb higher. For runes, going Conqueror won't be that good anymore, and Predator is a slight trap stat-wise. Currently, Phase Rush is incredibly strong on Skarner, and not only will proccing it let you stick to people for more Qs, but proccing it and then dragging people away at light speed comes in clutch. Moving on to the mid lane, our S tier roster will be Diana, Galio, Echo, Yasuo, and Katarina, with our god tier of Fizz and Zed. For the changes to the list, we got Veigar moving from A to B tier, and due to the increase of assassin picks, in particularly Zed, Veigar is struggling to impact the game and surviving the laning phase. Twisted Fate going from A to B tier, where the nerfs to his W are quite impactful to his early game in terms of dueling and skirmishing. Getting that stun card up 2 seconds later when fighting a Zed or a Fizz probably means you die, and his win rate in plat or below wasn't that high to begin with. Cassio is going to move from A to B tier, where mid lane is mostly about roaming and skirmishing at the moment, and is quite early and mid game focused, where Cassio just isn't able to keep up. Victor drops from A to B tier as well, where the Ghost buffs didn't really help him as much, and he has the same issue as Cassio, where late game scaling immobile control mages who can't impact the early game don't do well in solo queue currently. And we have Ziggs going from B tier to the Shadow Realm, where he has the same problems as Veigar, Cassio, and Victor. Lissandra will drop to B tier and join Ziggs in the Shadow Realm, where Lissandra is considered good into assassins. Her only real use right now is a counterpick to LeBlanc. Outside of that, she's incredibly mediocre and lacks the proper laning power to actually stop assassins like she could in the past. She even has a hard losing matchup to Zed right now compared to a winning one in the past. Kali's gonna jump ship as well to the Shadow Realm, where this champ is actually just awful, with roughly a 45% win rate, and it doesn't even go much higher the higher you climb. Fun fact about her, despite being this bad, she is the 3rd most played mid laner in bronze and almost in the top 5 in silver. And for our last change, we have Diana going from God tier to S tier. With one of her biggest counter matchups, Galio, becoming more and more popular, Diana isn't as godly anymore compared to the other God tier champs, so we moved her down as her win rate and play rate have been on a steady decline patch after patch. Which brings me to our first mid lane highlight, being Zed, who moved from S tier to God tier. He is the most influential mid in the game for draft phase, holding a 52% win rate, a 14% pick rate, and a 40% ban rate in gold currently. The only other champion that comes close is Fizz, and his pick rate is lower by 6% and a ban rate by 22%. Zed has almost returned to his Season 3 glory days, cue the nostalgia, and currently has no hard losing matchups in gold besides very low pick rate champions like Nocturne, who is kinda sleeper OP pick at the moment, not gonna lie, and Garen and Malphite middle. Everything else is either playable for him or a hard winning matchup like versus Veigar, Kassadin, Syndra, and Orianna, which pretty much means that Zed is pretty blind pickable in this bracket. For itemization, his normal electrocute setup is still the standard where you rush Ghostblade into other lethality items, but when versus comps that have no squishy targets, you can one rotation like versus TF middle, who often builds tanky, Ezreal AD carry with Iceborne, Leona support, or Malphite top and Volley jungle. You could use his Conqueror setup that is also on our champion pages. This setup allows you to still be impactful in these types of games with some solid consistent AoE damage. Next up, we got Galio, and he's currently sitting in S tier at the moment and is one of the strongest mid laners that people don't want to play. He has a 53% win rate, a 5% pick rate, and it goes up the higher up the ladder you go. He does suck versus Zed, but all his other champion matchups he wins versus Yasuo, Fizz, LB, Cat, TF, Diana, Sylas, Akali. He's particularly annoying for AP melee assassins to deal with. So if you don't like playing with one of those, which is, let's be honest, I doubt it's possible not to hate one of them right now, then Galio is the simple solution to your problem. One mistake I noticed though with lower level Galio players is they think he's a tank when he's really not. This champion should be built with absolutely zero tank items, build it full AP as the most effective way to win with Galio at any level of play, as he will still be tanky due to his baseline stats and kit along with Zanya's. If you're building stuff like Thornmail on Galio, you're doing it wrong and should just go play top lane instead. Galio is a tanky AoE burst mage, not a tank who's also a mage. And lastly, we have Swain, who moved from off the list to B tier, where Swain currently sits at a 53% win rate in gold, but only has a 0.5% pick rate in mid lane, however slightly goes up in silver and bronze. The buffs to his kit or mini rework shift some of the power he has that make him a decent support and puts it back into his ability to mid lane. The big thing for him is Q now passing through champions, meaning versus all these heavy melee dive comps we see in the meta, Swain is going to absolutely destroy them during team fights. As for his passive, it's pretty much the same as before in the late game, even if you have 40% CDR. But that's not what's important. What is important now is that it's better in the early game, which is when Swain wants to start that snowball and also get his passive HP rolling. We believe that these buffs will help him in the mid lane quite a bit, especially at lower levels of play, and you'll see him return to the meta and potentially even reach A tier if his pick rate improves. Next up for our AD carries, our starting S tier roster is Jinx, Jhin, Caitlyn, Vayne, and Ezreal, with the throne of God tier belonging to the Ice Goddess Ashe. For the changes to the list, we have Swain going from B to A tier, where the mini rework also helps Swain do well in the bot lane, as since marksmen in general are actually weaker than their control mage counterparts in the bot lane. Senna makes it out of Thresh's Lantern to B tier, and where actual Senna ADC has made a slight return to the meta and is just barely playable to be making B tier. Lucian will join his wife in B tier, where Lucian is struggling to compete in this meta with a suboptimal build. Compared to the other ADCs, Lucian's lack of range and lack of damage, even at close range, doesn't allow him to do much at the moment. Even when Lucian is the 9th most popular pick in AD carry in gold, that's when you know he's really struggling. Cassiopeia will fall from A to B tier as well, where the Cassio nerfs to her base stats a couple of patches ago, which tried to make her more of a mid laner rather than a side laner, has taken a win rate and play rate hit in the bot lane due to being more vulnerable in the early game. So for our first AD carry spotlight, we got Caitlyn in S tier, but is borderline God tier. She's receiving some fairly impactful buffs this time around, even if they are just number tweaks. Though she is only getting a +2 AD buff, this buff to an AD carry has been common over the years, and on average shifts the win rate by around 1%, and 5 move speed on any champion does roughly the same. Combine them in Caitlyn's early game is decently stronger, being able to kite easier, space easier for more autos, and even has more poke and pushing power. She currently sits at a 51% win rate, a 18% pick rate, which makes her the 3rd most popular AD carry in gold, and we expect her to jump up a percent at least. The big thing stopping her from jumping too high up in the rankings is her matchup into Ashe, the current only God tier champion, and Jhin, the other God tier candidate on this patch, especially since he soft counters Ashe, aren't good, so if anything happens to them, expect Caitlyn to rise up even further. Also, for itemization, if you're snowballing, you can go Infinity Edge before Storm Razor and find slightly more success. Lastly, our next AP carry is Karthus bot lane. He's going to go from off the list to A tier with a 55% win rate and a 0.3% pick rate in gold. I know, it's a low sample size, but if you climb up the ladder in Diamond, it's a 57% win rate and a 1% pick rate, where in D2+, it's a 58% win rate and a 2% pick rate. What this essentially means is that Karthus bot lane can effectively be called a sleeper OP pick that only people in High-ELO are currently abusing. We slotted him into A tier for now, but if he becomes more popular, he has S or even God tier potential even in low elo. This is likely the most effective bot lane carry you can play in low elo, as well as always will have an impact on the game even at early on thanks to your global ultimate. You can farm safely with Qs even if your Leona support is AFK behind you with how much damage your Q does, and you can trade 1v2 as you outrange the enemy champions as well. The biggest advantage though is when your team leaves you to die to the fed enemy assassins in the team fights, it doesn't matter because you are Karthus and you will almost always deal more damage than enemy AD carry, who is also left to die thanks to your passive. He's also the #1 recommended sleeper pick for bot lane from Adam Moriarty Isle's Challenger Coach. Adam, why do you even make me say this? Last up in the support role, our S tier roster will be Soraka, Nautilus, Leona, Brand, Senna, Bard, and Thresh, with our God tier of Lulu and Blitzcrank. The only change to this list this time is Brand moving from A to S tier, but instead of a short little snippet of why he did jump up on our list, he is our first support champion spotlight. He's sitting at a 53% win rate and a 5% pick rate currently, but it both should increase due to the buffs to Spell Thieves on this patch. Brand is already pretty close to S tier and is one of the best Spell Thieves users. The extra 5 AP on Shard of True Ice is nice, but the big one is the extra 25% mana regeneration on his baseline and Frostfang. This allows Brand to relentlessly spam his spells to bully lane even harder than he currently does without much concern, as his mana costs aren't too high to begin with. With the amount of poke bully AD carries in the meta, Ashe, Caitlyn, and Jhin who do well with Brand lanes, dominance, as well as the popularity of squishy enchanter supports like Janna and Lulu who can't handle Brand's level of aggression and raw damage output in lane. We suspect this buff will allow him to jump to S tier this patch, where bonus points he smashes Aphelios pickers pretty hard due to him having one of the worst MR values in the game, so even more reason to pick up Brand. For your rune setup, he does run either Comet or Dark Harvest, but Harvest does much better, and for itemization, Rylai's before Liandry's has a significantly higher win rate, as it allows you to no-skilled combo people by slowing them with E or W into a free stun. Last up, we have Soraka, who is solidified in our S tier. She has a 53% win rate and a 7% pick rate, and like Brand, Soraka is a Spell Thieves user, though in tougher matchups some people do go Relic Shield. The Spell Thief's buffs will also help Soraka quite a bit during the laning phase, as more mana means more Q and E spam, allowing her to have a stronger, more impactful laning phase. And as we have all seen in the past, whenever a champion like Soraka has an easy time bullying people in lane, she ends up pretty OP, and not only will she have an easier time during the laning phase now, but she still scales like a monster post-laning phase. This is inherently the issue with her, enchanters scale too well to have strong laning phases, so whenever champs like Soraka or even Janna in the past are given the ability to consistently poke people out in lane, then in solo queue they way overperform. Soraka in particular has strong synergy with Ashe, Jhin, and Caitlyn, who are all some of the best ADCs in around gold currently, adding to her value as a pick. And there's a split between running Aerie and Guardian. While Aerie is more popular, Guardian has a higher win rate. Personally, I feel like it's matchup dependent, and you can run either one, with Guardian being good to stop all in lanes, and otherwise Aerie being a standard choice. And that's all I got for you all. Thank you all so much for watching, and be sure to check out our other content on this channel, as well as head over onto our site over at mobalytics.gg. As always, I'm your host Ryan Flares Doyle, and as always, have a wonderful rest of your day. Be safe out there, remember that you matter, and good luck out on the Rift, Summoner.